Let's take a look now at how we will configure the LDAP, or Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, using Active Directory for the Hyperscale Manager. And we're also going to do it for the flash system A9000. We're going to do it in two different places. It's very important though that we log in as a local admin. Let's do that now. We will use this to ensure that we have all of the rights to then configure LDAP instead of using local credentials. Here we are logging in. Here's the A9000. Let's focus on the A9000 itself. Notice the hub, and we're going to click on the LDAP icon. Take a look at all these values. You can see that it is inactive right now. We have many values that we will configure together in this example. When you're configuring LDAP while the HSM is monitoring the system, we need to review the fact that when we actually activate LDAP, we will actually temporarily lose access to the A9000 until we actually convert LDAP on the actual HSM itself as well. We'll go into this in more detail very soon. And again, just to repeat, we're going to be converting two different accounts to LDAP, the A9000 as well as the HSM account. When we do both, we'll be able to see everything exactly as we wish to again. And we'll be doing this in the management server under the manager configuration. Notice where it says the monitoring account. When I click on that, you can see this is the other account that we'll be updating later on in this example. We'll be using this local account and changing it into an LDAP account. And again, the reason we were able to see this is another predefined account on the flash system A9000. Let's go back to the flash system A9000. So we're going to click on LDAP. We're going to make sure that we stay inactive. It's very important not to make it active until the entire form is 100% valid and working. So we will do this last. You'll see how we can actually test the form before making this active. This is a critical step to make sure that the form is inactive for now. Since we're going to hook this up to the Active Directory, we will select the Microsoft Active Directory radio. These two values about the timeout as well as the cache period are defaulted for a general purpose. If you want to actually make sure that it times out in a longer period, you can adjust this upwards or downwards for your particular network issues. If you're interested in making sure that the cache period is updated more frequently from the Active Directory, you can change that value as well. Let's add an LDAP server. We will definitely need the fully qualified domain name, or FQDN. I will also need the IP address. I'm going to enter in the IP address right now. And here's a nice little shortcut. I'm actually going to go to my Active Directory server now. And when I go to the actual computer, which is my Active Directory server, if I go to the properties, here is my full computer name. And if I actually copy this, I can paste it back into the form. Let's do that right now. I'm bringing this up because it's important to not mistype any of the values, because we want to make sure we don't have any problems. So what's very important before we go any further is that you can make sure that from the HSM as well as the A9000 can actually ping and route to this particular server as well as to that IP address. You can do that from the actual host. You can also involve the local IP or IT department to help you make sure that the routing and the IP tests work successfully. The distinguished name is also where we're going to need to know to make sure we can find the users that we're going to authenticate against. Again, we'll go back to that Active Directory server. I'm going to use the Active Directory snap-in. Now, here's my Active Directory. Notice that I have a bunch of users already defined here. I'm going to make the window a little bit easier. And here's my actual Active Directory. Notice the users and notice the XIV lab folder. So this is known as the root distinguished name, or root DN. And if I want to search this, I'm actually going to use this now, and let's do the copy and paste operation. So to make sure this works properly, let's go to the View tab and make sure that you have checked Advanced Features, and you'll see why in just a second. So if I right click now and using Properties, take a look, I'll actually have Attribute Editor showing, and these are very important values that we can copy and paste into our Hyperscale Manager. And we'll see this in just a second here. So again, if I bring up now my DN, or my distinguished name, I can double click and then copy it, and watch what I do. Simply going back to my form and then paste, you'll see it's 100% accurately paste. I can also use a certificate if I'm using secure SSL encryption. When I click apply, it's been added. So let's scroll down. Now we've defined a server, we need to add a user. This will be a user that will look up on the tree. This is only used for read-only seeking users or groups to browse the tree. Let's create a brand new user to show off how we can do this. So I'm going to create this user in my users folder. I'll just create a new user. I'll make sure that the logon name is exactly the same. I'll type in a password. Now I've created this user, and let's use that shortcut again. So again, I will bring up my distinguished name, or DN. By double clicking, I can then copy it, and then going to the HSM, I will paste it into the service user field. Notice the format is exactly correct. Then I need to type in the password. These attributes are very important. This is how Active Directory will parse the information and find the username, as well as its attributes and what group it's a member of. These values are the normal defaults for Active Directory and do not need to be changed. Let's go to our LDAP just so I can show you some of where these values are mapped. So if I go to a particular user, notice if I go to the SAM account name, you can see my value. This is exactly how it'll present back to LDAP and the Hyperscale Manager. Now, let's go to member of. Let's take a look at where that maps. Again, we go back to our Active Directory. Notice I have a separate tab for member of, and this shows the groups. And it's very important that later on I'll be adding groups to make sure we have the right membership. If I go back, we can scroll down further. Now this is very important about role mapping. This is how a user that's in LDAP, or Active Directory in our case, will make sure the appropriate rights when being authenticated inside the A9000 or the Hyperscale Manager. As you see, I have two important roles, the storage admin role on the left and the read-only role on the right. So let's take a look now at how we will actually create these groups in our Active Directory so that users are mapped appropriately. The other two roles we don't need to actually fill out, but they're there if you want to use them. Those optional roles are the integration role as well as the security admin role underneath. So let's create a storage admin group role right now. Now remember the XIV labs, I'm actually going to create it in this particular container. Here's the group. So I will call it storage admin group. I'll make sure it's a global group. I've created this group now. While we're here, let's also create another group For our read-only role, and again, just like it sounds, this role, if any user is made a member of, it will only have read-only rights inside the HSM or the flash system A9000. And again, we'll use our shortcut by going to the distinguished name and grabbing it, copying it, and so we will have a perfect paste right now in the storage admin role. And if you want, we'll actually go back. You can see that it pasted perfectly. So we can now use paste again and just simply change the first part of it. So instead of it reading storage admin, we will make this the exact same as what we just created inside the Active Directory. And again, we don't need to do the other two roles, but the first two roles, these top two, are mandatory. So we will click Apply, and again, we've added it, but we have not made it active. And so what's a very important step is let's actually test this. We can go to the Actions menu, and you'll see the LDAP is already highlighted, and you can see the Test LDAP section. So now we have to give it a username and password to test it, to see if it's working properly. We want to make sure that LDAP is browsing the tree and finding a particular user. So let's go back to our Active Directory. We're going to create a new user that we're going to see if it works properly. So I'll call this a test user. And again, make sure to give this user a password. And again, this is just for testing purposes. Here's that user. Now, we need to make sure that this user is at least a member of the storage admin group or the read-only group to test. If it's not part of either of these groups, it wouldn't be allowed to log in. So we're going to put this as a storage admin group. We go back to the GUI, and now let's test this brand new user. Put in its password. And as you see, it was able to query the LDAP, and it found that user successfully. So that means we can make this active. Watch what happens. As we click Apply, we are going to make the flash system A9000 use LDAP. It'll disappear from this view, and then we will change the HSM itself to use LDAP, and we'll be able to get back into it. Notice that it is still processing. It's switching over now, and you will see that system disappear because it's now using LDAP for all of its monitoring. So now we will change our monitoring server, the HSM or Hyperscale Manager, and we'll change the manager to use LDAP. So here we are in the monitoring account. So we will now say, okay, let's use a particular account here in our LDAP or Active Directory server. So let's go back to our Active Directory. So we no longer need that test user. Let's actually create a new user for our monitoring account. So I'm going to create a user to specifically do all of the Hyperscale Manager monitoring tasks on the LDAP. Again, make sure to put in a password. So it's very important that this account has the storage admin role. This is very important for it to not only log in, but it needs to have the admin role mapping to be able to do all of the admin roles on any defined storage systems. So here I have defined it. It's part of the storage admin group. I can now put this user in this particular field box. After I click Apply, take a look. I now can go back. And now those other two systems I can't get to because I've switched over to LDAP. However, the flash system A9000 will go to authentication succeed, and as you see, fully protected. We're able to see that. We can change these other two in a future session. To change these, we would simply do the same steps on each particular defined system. As you see, LDAP is now working properly as active with this particular LDAP configuration. Let's now create a user to log into the HSM. It's important that if we want this user to log in to the HSM, we need to make sure that it's part of the storage admin group. So to test this, we're going to log out and log in as this brand new user just to make sure everything's working properly. As we see, this user has admin rights using the LDAP Active Directory login and not any local accounts. It can see that flash system because we've authenticated properly on LDAP for both the HSM as well as the flash system A9000. Now, if I want to do domains or secure multi-tenancy so that I can make a user see only certain resources but not give it full admin rights, let's do that right now. So I will create a brand new domain now that a new user will only be able to see. It won't be able to see anything else on the flash system A9000. It'll only see any resources I've put into this domain. So I'll call this domain 1. And again, I can put in some test values. Obviously, you can use whatever values are more appropriate for your business. Now, please take a note here. Domain 1 is also going to be the LDAP domain ID, and we'll be using that later on in this example. So we've now created a domain, and notice the global space. That's what a normal admin user would see. But now we're going to actually use this user to only see domain 1 resources. So don't forget that the storage admin group will see everything. So now we're going to create a new group. For usefulness, please consider using a similar structure, storage admin group at domain 1, so that I can actually pass the appropriate credentials and pathing for LDAP back inside the hyperscale manager. So now we're going to create a brand new user. It's important to note that I've been creating new users so that it actually shows up immediately. If I changed a user, that's where that timeout and that cache of 20 minutes comes into play. So by creating a new user, I can test immediately and not wait 20 minutes for a particular refresh. So now I'm creating a brand new domain user to test out multi-tenancy. Again, I'll create a password, and we're going to take this user now and put that into our domain group, not the overall global group. Now here we are at the storage admin, but instead of just putting it in the main global group, we're going to do something different. Notice as I scroll over, I'm going to make sure it's domain 1 and click OK. So let's log off as our global admin, and now let's log in as an LDAP domain specific user. Again, domain specific to the A9000 array inside our hyperscale manager. Notice I don't have the dashboard access anymore. I only have access to this particular set of resources. I am now only inside domain 1. So any resources that are assigned to domain 1 will be the only items that I can see. We've just shown you how to configure LDAP for a single particular array, as well as the hyperscale manager or HSM monitoring account, and then create also domain multi-tenancy users that can only see certain resources that a global administrator would assign. Thanks again for your time.